how do we have a story that could work across the region? That people across different culture, value systems would kind of come in to appreciate. So the beauty with stories is that themes can be universal, right? The problem here is characters and the relatability of the design of the characters and the world. That unfortunately needs to be kind of like localized.
All right, welcome everybody. My name is Tristan. I am the head of people for our cross-border business at Glints and also serve as the co-host along with Reggie for our Let's Talk C Business podcast.
Yeah. This is our fifth episode. Yeah. Wow. So now you're the expert now, right?
It flies, time flies. And today we are going to talk about expanding your brand throughout Southeast Asia. And we're going to talk about it through the lens of really understanding customer preferences and how that changes with the nuances of different countries throughout the region. And then with the identifying of those, how to actually create a compelling brand to reach those different audiences. And then we'll get tactical as well and talk about actual distribution of the content and so forth. But really excited that we are joined today by Derek, the co-founder of Vidsy. And maybe just to kick things off, it would be great, Derek, if you could just introduce yourself and a little bit about the work that you're doing in the region.
So I'm Derek. I'm one of the co-founders at Vidsy. So Vidsy, we're a creator platform working with filmmakers across Asia. A lot of the work I did is in Southeast Asia, working with brands, streamers, broadcasters to tell stories. I guess I'm here to share a bit of my insights and experience. A bit of a caveat, I left my own company last October. Different story altogether, but yeah.
Not on this show.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Derek. And maybe to kick things off, let's start by talking about some brand 101 and maybe thinking about why business leaders should really invest in brand building, especially when trying to expand to different markets.
Okay. Maybe I could start off very much with my own story of expanding our brand, into Southeast Asia. At the same time, I think it's a bit of a cheat code because we use stories, like our product stories. So we work with filmmakers to bring their films, their short films on the platform. So we have a lot of different stories. It allows us to kind of expand in the region. But a lot of how we started as well also is, picking Singapore as our, base of operations here. We were experimenting, how do we kind of, create the content, work with our creators, get the content out. At the same time, distribute that content, to our local market. And we have that playbook. And with that playbook, we're able to say, hey, let's replicate that, across Southeast Asia, replicating using kind of like that same method. One big challenge we realize is that in that process of replication, a lot of times we are spending or using ads to get into the market. Yes, we've got the local content, but because we're new in the market and the playbook that we've kind of built up, we're constantly just going in and using ad spend to kind of expand very quickly, what most startups do. But if you kind of pull back on that ad spend, because of market conditions and all that, you realize that, hey, your revenue start to drop, eyeballs start to drop. And it really got me thinking a lot about, how are we really kind of doing marketing? And I think a lot of that placement of how we place a lot of emphasis on performance marketing, kind of getting what we want to in the market is driven from this engine of growth, which is using ads. And I guess I was reflecting and thinking a lot about, what about brand, right? How does brand kind of come into play? And you've heard stories about how, very strong brands, come in, commands, so much more value in the marketplace, commands, higher click-throughs, hence your return on advertising spend, is a lot higher as well also. So I guess a lot of times as my own experience in trying to build a brand within Southeast Asia, yes, there are kind of like growth techniques to kind of get us into the market. But focusing on brand was something very important as well also, because there are kind of like that levels. I can go on more. And we know that with brand, right? Like without brand, you are a commodity, right? And if you look at what we do as a business as well, so from a customer standpoint, we work with brands to tell stories, produce content. There are a lot of production houses out there locally, in the region as well also. Without a brand, we are the same. We are the same. And going into the marketplace, we will just be competing on a price standpoint. And being based out here in Singapore to compete in the markets out in the region is tough. We don't have kind of like that leverage from a staffing, manpower kind of standpoint. So we don't want to be that commodity, right? So we need to kind of like look and focus on how do we build a brand, what differentiates us, how do we kind of like bring our community in, why would brands come in and see that value that we're providing despite our price? Yeah. So that's something important that I've kind of discovered.
And if we, double click on this idea of building a brand, I'm curious, if we were to distill that down in terms of what you're actually looking to achieve in that brand, and then that helps lay the foundation for exporting that brand to a new market, what are the kind of components of a strong brand strategy or story?
So I go a bit back into a 101 for myself, and I see brand as a sort of pairing. I'll give an example. Let's look at Apple. We know Apple has it's a good brand. Think of the advertising that they did, crazy ones, during their Think Different campaigns. Not sure if you guys watched that. But what they were doing was they wanted to associate themselves with entrepreneurs, creators, right? So if you remember that ad, it's a pairing of Albert Einstein as a star. You've got Gandhi in there. You've got different kind of like change makers and creators and Richard Branson, entrepreneurs in there. And Apple was leveraging, personalities of sorts in that sense, change makers of the sorts, to really kind of like illustrate, hey, that pairing, that deliberate pairing of my brand and all these amazing people would kind of like deliver a certain outcome because the audiences want to be like these change makers as well, and therefore kind of like follow Apple as a brand. Fast forward to last week where Apple released Crush.
Yeah, I saw that. Oh my god!
I'm not sure if you guys seen the new iPad Pro ad where they've got this metal thing that was just crushing all this creative icons, right? Piano, paint, basically what creators use. And Apple was showing this ad, and that pairing of the destruction of creative tools. What is Apple thinking? It's a great ad in the sense that it's got people talking about it. You've got high impressions out of it, high views out of it. But was that a good pairing, right? So effectively, you're getting a bad branding. Because I believe that everything we do, you're gonna get some people looking at it as a good branding, some people looking at it as a bad branding. But I think ultimately what you want yourself to do as a brand is try to get more people to kind of come in and look at it as a good brand. So I guess that's fundamentally, I think, how I see branding. It is that pairing. And when I kind of like drive that down to content, and I'll jump a bit later to talk about distribution, but if you look at where audiences are, I have a very simple structure. Fundamentally, we're trying to bring a message to an audience, and that's marketing, right? We're trying to get a certain message to get our audiences to be at the current state, to move to a desired state, because the brand, the product, the services is there. And that's what marketers try to do. We try to influence kind of like that change. And in this process of message to audience, content can play a really interesting role to deliver that. And I always see content as a Trojan horse to carry the message to bring it across to the audience.
So we are Trojan horse coders, right?
What we're doing now. Sorry. And I guess in that process, the pairing of, going back a bit, where do people kind of like consume or go on social media today? They are going on social media to be entertained, to be educated, to be inspired. They don't go onto social media to say, hey, let's watch an ad. And I guess that's that space that I wanted to work with. We know where audiences are going on these platforms to do certain things. And I think a lot of it goes back to this idea of pairing again, right? So how do you pair that message to entertain? How do you pair that message to educate? How do you pair that message to inspire? And that's where I kind of like use stories and use content to play a big part in that process. And I can go very deep into kind of like the story. Shall I continue?
Before you continue, yes, I wanted to ask a bit about this brand pairing thing,
Yes.
right? Because it's not like new per se,
Yes.
and on some level, almost every brand is that actually takes branding very seriously is trying to do something like that.
Yeah.
Right. Whether is it like, support some sustainability thing, some
Correct.
women empowerment, or even like the cheesiest one is the sports people, right? Sports people, every brand also use sports, so it's considered very brand safe, and at some point, don't you think like that the arbitrage of certain pairing no longer is sexy?
I think the work here is for marketeers to understand their audiences, right? So the process of what I talked about, which is deliver a message to an audience, a marketeer's work is fundamentally to understand the audience, the insights around the audience, to design that message. Everything thereafter, you can be supported by your creative production house, a publisher, influencer, etc. Right? And you can find different ways to deliver media, paid, earn, own, whatever. But a lot of what marketeers' work has to start with is understanding your audience and design relevant pairings in that sense. So I guess while yes, there are a lot of different trends that's out there, I think a lot of work to really, really understand who the audience are, your customers are, is very important. And yes, that ability to then find exciting new pairing, it's a space to kind of like expand into. But yes, there are trends there.
Yeah, but just to be clear, essentially what you're saying is it's okay to use cheesy old pairing. Like
as long as it works.
As long as it works.
As long as it works.
It doesn't matter.
As long as it
sports
works.
string must use sports people.
As long as it works.
As long as
yeah, because you are leveraging off of that particular influence, be it a trend, be it a influencer, be it content or story, to get to where you want to be at as well. Also, so yeah.
But how about the versatility of this? Because we're talking about creating content, but obviously with the end consumer in mind. But the consumer is so different if you're speaking about an audience that might be in Singapore versus Indonesia versus Vietnam. And you spoke about Apple earlier, and that's a brand that, of course, you can go to any quarter of the world and it'll transit. But for organizations that don't have that luxury of having a household brand name, how do they think about content through the lens of adaptability and being versatile enough in their messaging to be able to reach these different markets?
Okay, so I'll go a bit into like structurally what I do when I design a story, and I look at three main things: story, the message that I'm trying to push across, and the kind of like the world that we kind of built in, right? So the world we built, the characters we put in, basically the characters have to go through a journey. It mirrors what the marketer wants to do from a current state to a desired state. And at the same time, there is a certain message or theme that comes out of that story. Your question is really, how do we have a story that can work across the region? That people across different culture, value systems would kind of come in to appreciate. So the beauty with stories is that themes can be universal, right? The problem here is characters and the relatability of the design of the characters and the world. That unfortunately needs to be kind of like localized. So an example that we had is we had this highly viral short film from Singapore that basically talked about a father-son relationship or parent-child relationship. parent-child relationship thematically works globally, right? Because it is themes that we kind of like, grow out with different stories. We have that in our own lives and all. So on that level, it makes it really easy for us to relate to that story. I think the difficulty there then is localization in terms of, so okay, from a local context, the story is a Karanguni, which is a newspaper collection kind of job, right? So there is a certain local context to the role. Bring it a level up, there is a bit of an Asian value system where, usually Asian parents love you, don't tell you they love you kind, right? And slap you and hit you. But they love you.
Not a house view, we're not advocating this, okay?
But they love you.
It's just what it is.
They love you. They love you, but they show love in a very different way. Which I think then, and I'm making an assumption here from a Western kind of standpoint, it would be very seen differently. But at the heart of it, that relatability allowed that film to travel, right? It traveled hundreds of millions worldwide, globally. But at the same time, you get feedback from like a Brazilian kid, a UK grandma, and say, hey, a very interesting insight to the language, a very interesting insight to the father-child relationship. And I think that's where it kind of differs. So I think, and going back to the question, I think where you're kind of like looking to design a brand story to hit across the region, the message or that theme needs to be, in a way, centrally owned in a way where it's relevant to the various markets. Of course, you can try to then create a story to see, let's see if it works to hit across. If not, localization has to come to play, right? Be it adapting it into a local setting, so that's where the world and the characters come in, or working with local players, right? Influencers, different content publishers to kind of like adapt that theme accordingly. But I think the marketer has to look at, what is that message we want to deliver, and I believe that is and should be universally the same, because that is also the truth to the product and what that product serves to meet. And I've always had a very interesting story and my own relationship with my clients. I always go into like a meeting with my client, right? And they'll be doing basically, and my clients are marketeers, right? They'll do a one-to-one pitch to me. And my wife calls me a sucker for this, because every time I go in the meeting, I come out, I'm like a sold customer. Because the marketer fundamentally, understands the audience, delivers that insight, shares with me that insight. So they know that product market fit. They're able to communicate that product market fit, but from a one-to-one standpoint. My challenge as a storyteller, someone who runs content, is to figure out, how do I turn that one-to-one into a one-to-many? Because now the problem is from that message to audience, right? It's very easy to communicate one and sell that one, but it's very high touch. How do you scale that using content? How do you effectively turn that one audience into a large enough audience base or customer base? And I think that is then the challenges that we've got to figure out. But if you go back to the core, it is that one message that you're trying to deliver. It shouldn't change, because your product's not different in different markets as well also. How do you find that? And that's key.
Yeah, and another challenge I'm just envisioning is, when you're going from one to one to one to many, especially thinking about, portraying the stories or characters of people from other cultures. How do marketers avoid, the pitfalls of, and find the right balance in terms of really portraying these cultures in the region in a respectful and accurate way? Because it's not easy when you go from, when you're trying to scale.
I think this is where, so this bit here, we're talking about turning that insight into that creative. And I think in that aspect, from a people standpoint, it is really, really important to work with locals. So from a finding the insight standpoint, you can find someone, come in, look at the data, go on ground, talk to customers. You're able to kind of find that certain universal truth. But I think when you're translating that universal truth to something that's localized, it's great if you bring or partner yourself with a local storyteller or a local publisher or a content partner, right? Because they're going to bring in their wealth of knowledge in terms of what the local setting is. An example, is I work with Unilever Dove Hair, and you know the kind of ads that they do. So universally, there is a certain truth that they're trying to deliver. But when we had to do that in the Philippines, locally, what had happened was we worked with a local filmmaker, together with the local Unilever team. We realized that, okay, in Philippines, the definition of beauty for them is long, straight, black hair, which may not exist, in across the different markets, right? So understanding that was important, because in understanding that, we're able to craft basically a story of women with curly, short, dyed hair, which is really the opposite of definition of beauty in the Philippines, and what then Dove stands for. So using that insight in the market, and I might not know that insight because I'm not Filipino or engaged with the beauty scene or FMCG space. Without that insight, I won't be able to craft that story. But having to work with someone local and understand kind of like that nuance allows us to do that. So yeah, working with local creators is a really important way, I think, to circumvent, I think, any stereotypes that you might create, or navigating kind of like the cultural nuances as well also.
Let's Talk See Business is brought to you by Glint's Talent Hub. We understand that building a thriving business is immensely challenging. It is especially intense for business leaders like yourself. Hence, we want to journey with you. Glint's Talent Hub is the leading all-in-one solution for all your talent needs. Our mission is to pair you with the right talent anywhere across Southeast Asia that fits the unique needs of your business. From there, we handle all your talent management needs. We're talking talent sourcing, hiring, EOR, PEO, talent development. We have a track record of 2x faster team building and up to 70% cost savings. If you want to expand in Southeast Asia, we are your partners. Connect with us, link in the description below.
Yeah, and that's of course, a big part of where Glint spends our time talking to clients in terms of helping them actually find the talent on the ground.
Exactly.
But how have you thought about that through the lens of building the team that you need on the ground, or what skills do you feel like an organization should look for when they're thinking about how do I find that right? Whether it's a local partner or whether it's actually hiring. How should organizations thinking about bringing those skills that they need to the team in addition to those perspectives?
Okay, so the way I kind of talked about that process was fundamentally we're trying to get a message in front of our audience. The content is a Trojan horse for the message to get in front of the audience. But to design that message, we've got to understand the audience insight, right? The audience insight piece is the hardest to find, right? You find someone who can understand data, who can go down and talk to customers, right? So I think that process of finding a team or someone to kind of build that can be built in-house, because it's fundamentally the job of someone inside to know your customers, to know your product, and to kind of design that. And that's important to find. In design, the creative localization is really, really important, right? So translating that message to something that you're delivering locally requires people on ground, right? So be it building marketing team, creative team on ground. If it's too expensive, then leveraging. There are a lot of freelance creators on ground as well locally to pair up, so that they bring that local insight, they bring the local nuance into play, and you're not blindsided by the lack of it. If you're running kind of like that decision regionally or from a headquarters standpoint. And the last bit, which is delivering that content to the audience, I think that's easy, right? That's a function of optimizing your costs. And I think what's interesting then is from a regional standpoint, where here in Southeast Asia, which is home to, I looked at the data and I think, top 4 countries, right? Southeast Asia countries will rank top 10 or top 20 on all the different platforms, right? TikTok, IG, etc., etc. You will see a Southeast Asia country on top of that. And I think because of how we use social media and use kind of like digital media, online media as a way to drive distribution, I bet you can find someone easily across Southeast Asia. And they could be a way to optimize costs to kind of like do that work. So if I take a step back, I think you can really design a really interesting, comprehensive team leveraging key resources somewhere to find insights, to then partner or bring local creative teams to adapt it to create the assets, and then outsource a distributed team to drive distribution. So
Yeah.
Fair. Actually, I wanted to ask a little bit more about this audience insight
yes,
piece, right?
Yes.
Because I understand what you're saying, right? Where the audience insight is superior. Like if you understand your audience, you already won the game on some level, right? And a lot of times when I talk to my clients, right, I was like, I'm quite shocked that they don't understand the audience at that level, right? So I would love to understand from your point of view, how insightful does the insight need to be a good audience insight?
I think from a creative standpoint, when I design the character, I am actually designing the customer. And in design the character, I need to know the customer really, really well. Most brand stories should not involve the brand as the main character. The main character needs to be the customer, because the customer is going through the journey. The character is the one going the journey. There's this concept in film where we call narrative transposition, something like that. You have experienced it, right? You watch a film, you feel the character, right? You feel for the journey, right? At the end of it, you want to be that character, right? You want to be in that shoes, and that's what stories do. That's what characters do. And you want the audiences, the customers, to relate to that character, and the brand comes in to be like the mentor, to be the guide. He's the one to guide, right? Because he plays that role where you as a customer will go and buy the services, right, to get to that desired point that you want. Now, sharing this really to kind of look at how we design a brand story and how the brand kind of like plays a part, but fundamentally telling a journey, right? Telling a story of the customer. So going back to, I think, the insights, I try to find as much insights to help me design this character. The world easy to build because you can research and find around, and it's the space that we're in, it's the colors and the visual identity that the brand has, it's the values that the brands might stand for, right? You can design that world. But designing the character is super hard. And to design that character, you need to really understand insight. So another example would be, I use a lot of Unilever because I work with them, and they have a very strong insights team. Unilever Lifebuoy, so hand washing, and we did a story about a working mother whose child has hand, foot, mouth disease.
That's so relatable.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But at the point of time when we did it, I didn't have a child. I didn't have a kid, so I did not understand the pain, right? The parent had to go through. Child has hand, foot, mouth HMND, right? And you can't go to school, which means the parent has to be home. The parent has to be home. Our entire work schedule gets thrown off, right? And we might have deadlines to meet, and things to submit to like bosses and to the team. It just goes haywire. And really, that story allowed us to do that research, to understand kind of like what mothers are thinking about, feeling, parents are feeling, and really kind of design that in the character. And the supporting role comes in with hygiene and washing hands to prevent kind of like the spread and all. But understanding kind of like that customer, the customer who would buy the hand wash, was really important in designing kind of like this very relatable experience and moment, and how then the product kind of comes in and fit in, and ultimately being able to share the brand, right? What Unilever stands for. There's no conversion in that process. We would then do a conversion ad after that and say, about 10x kills 99% of germs. So that comes later, as a separate ad to drive at least conversion. But the story we built here, builds a journey for the customer, working parents, moms who are buying kind of like the soap hand soap for the family, what the brand stands for, how they pair and they associate with how parents are feeling. All that goes into that story as a simple 3-5 minute story.
Yeah. No, and I can second that even in a different format, right? Like, so when we do the podcast, the example in our head is consistent. You know, like we're always talking to this middle upper class working professional.
Right.
So when you have that definition with a very clear profile, then everything just revolves around that profile, and it drives very strong resonance with the audience, right? Because they know that you're talking to them. And I tried to outsource this, it does not work. You know, like my producer has to be local, because these days everybody is thinking about optimizing costs, right? Like, where do I optimize the cost? Right? And a lot of the other things like editing, managing your social media, designing, all those things can go out into the region, well and good. But you want the people to do the audience insight, or your producers to be here, to live the life here. And then they feel a different level of understanding. Right? And I think that's quite that's important.
It is an important role, and I think there are tools to also help kind of like, bring that out from a data level, right? So yes, you can, I forgot the word, but you can go in and do focus groups of sorts, talk to customers, and you should do that as well, also understand. But you can also look at your data, right? The data allows you to see at scale certain trends, right? And not looking at it from a vanity standpoint, but really going in and test hypothesis and being able to kind of come in and say, hey, there is a certain insight here that's validated by this data point as well, together with maybe what I'm kind of seeing on ground as well. So that's important to bring about. So going back to people, finding someone who appreciates data, scale, but the humanness in connection, right? It's so important today. And yeah, finding such folks is difficult.
Is it? Yeah, I was about to ask.
I also trying to find one.
Yeah, it's not easy to find.
Yeah.
And once you've landed on, so we've talked about kind of the importance in terms of having that local perspective on your team. Another would like to maybe expand and think about some of the other stakeholders, particularly, whether that's local influencers or, content creators. So would love to, understand, after you have that message and now you're actually just trying to go out and amplify that message in different respective markets, what is the role of these, local influencers and content creators in doing so?
Okay, I think the challenge here is, and I'll give it a spin in terms of like budgets and all that as well. Also, is that when we're creating content in this ecosystem, this social media kind of like landscape, right? The problem we're facing is that we're what we call we're working on a rented space, right? So we're all coming in with the Metas and the Googles, right? We're renting from them because it's their audience and we're buying on that. Which meant that if I want to, again, deliver the message to the audience with this media, I can use money, right? I can use money to get the message in front of the audience. It's very easy today. It's a lot easier today in the sense of, it's not as expensive as, traditional media in the past. You've got self-serve kind of like platforms, and anyone can serve a message out. It's a lot easier and it's more accessible today. But the problem is more garden. It's a rented space, so you need to pay to play. In a sense, where I thought, again, the Trojan horse analogy comes in is that people are going on social media to consume content. Right, they are going to places where they are listening to something, they're getting educated, they just want to be entertained. If you're able to understand that psyche, is then how do you create the right pairing of content to get in front of the audiences, i.e., without having to, which then creates, I think, two forms of distribution. Paid, where you have fundamentally, go back to the Unilever case, right, about the 99.9%, tactical video. Very likely I have to pay to get it in front of the audience. It becomes a TVC. I work with traditional media, buy ads, pre-rolls on YouTube, etc., just to get that message across. But if I have the story changes the game. People might be seeking out for that story because what had happened was parents were sharing, such stories as well, because there's a lesson learned. Hey, I don't want my family to have such situations, and you get shared amongst working moms, for example, and you create an opportunity to use that content to bring it in front of an audience who is actually seeking out for such content. Same with influencers, right? So pairing with influencers or working with influencers, you have people who are looking out for this content creators, and they're following what they're doing anyway already. The challenge here is finding the right pairing, again, with the message and who the influencers are as well. I don't do a lot of work with influencers, so I don't have a lot to talk about that, but I do a lot where it's bring them on as talents. Right? So bring them on as talents, have that ability to leverage off of their own following to come in. From a non-branded content standpoint, we've done some commission content, and we've got actors who have come in and acted in shows. And when we do like certain activations, right, it's really interesting to just see the actors come in and invite their audiences, their followers to jump into the show. And he's on the side doing commentary and saying, "Yeah, wait for the next part. I'm going to do this." So it's really interesting to, I guess, see talents be involved in that project, right? So you're leveraging off of that story, more native, kind of original kind of space to fundamentally distribute that content to their audience. And that's the other space I guess we see. And I do see them, how brands then come in to do pairing with, influencers. They do pairing with sponsorship on TV shows and content, or to kind of build their own content ecosystem as well also. What we're doing here today. So there are this opportunities to get that message in front of the audience without paying.
Curious to actually think about this through, what are some of the signs that leaders and organizations can look to get a sense that this is tracking well or measuring well, especially in this environment. As we were talking about earlier, it's all about the return for that investment and managing your cash burn and these types of things. So what are some of the early signs that, organizations are doing this well as they're expanding into region and thinking about building a brand?
Yeah, if you cut your advertising spend, your revenue is still going up. I think there's something there, right? Because brand commands a price. You're not a commodity, right? So if you're a Nike shirt versus like some generic brand shirt, you're charging $50. The other shirt is $5. It's still the same shirt. I still go for the Nike shirt, right? So I'm commanding a price because I'm not a commodity. Return on advertising spend in the sense of with a good brand, your click-through rates are higher, right? So you kind of see that. So technically, if you reduce kind of ad spend, people see the brand and still click into it, versus like generic brand, and you somehow appear on the feed, that would have a lower click-through rate. So you're compensating that with advertising spend. The last one would be retention, right? So with a brand, you cultivate a form of loyalty. Apple fanatics coming in, and every new thing, right, you buy. So in all this, I personally feel like if you take away the growth levers what I shared at the beginning, right? You take away the growth levers because it's so easy to bring a message in front of an audience today. Take that away, and if it still brings audiences in, if still making money, then you got a good brand.
Nice. We're going to open up the floor.
Yeah, let's open it up to any questions from folks in the audience.
I've done quite a bit of work for B2B as well also, and I think when you're marketing the product, you're marketing the company, right? So it's a very tactical delivery. It's not brand building at all. I think the idea here is, again, if you've got the characters, so characters don't have to be narrative, make believe, right? Although we actually did some work for Hitachi and we've actually created a narrative, content. But most B2B standpoint comes in and do a little bit more unscripted, more factual, documentary-ish kind of content, right? Where you journey the customer. You journey the customer through the process. Again, current state, desired state. Customer has a pain point. They need to be solved. Then your technology or service is there to be the Gandalf, the guide, right? Yeah, the savior in that sense, right? So I think delivering that allows the audiences who are other customers kind of relate to that journey as well also, and see what the brand stands for, what they do. And of course, ultimately, they have to make a certain purchase decision. They go and find the tactical pieces, there could be tactical videos as well, the videos on technology, the solutions, the website, everything, or there's a salesperson. So I think from a brand standpoint, I think that's a space. Now, I'll link this back to also branding people. So one challenge that I usually get from B2B customers is that I cannot get my customer to come in to be in the video, right? And then, oh no, I can't do a customer video in that sense. One solution was actually to showcase the company people working on the solution with the customer. So it's a brilliant idea there because you're then able to profile your own people, your own company as well, so through the lens of your own people. And at the same time, show them working on the solution with the customer as well. So that was one other angle that we can kind of like create. On your thoughts on founder, great question, because I think I went through that journey myself. I agree that as a founder, it's easy to portray and market, I think, the vision, the mission of what you stand for in the company. And people follow people today. I think if you look at LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn doesn't surface out company pages as much as people. And I think it's important then as founders being able to come in and hold that. The only challenge I had was how much of myself is presented as the company versus like myself, my own personal brand. But of course, as founder, it's very intertwined, and you realize you're able to kind of create that. But my own insights here is I don't always have to talk about my company, because at that point of time when I was with the company, I was talking a lot about company, and reached a point intuitively I was like, there's more to me. It's just the company, and I think that's where, yes, there is a lot more opportunities to profile the founder as well also, and then use that as a way to what I call touch points to align back to the message that we're trying to deliver as well also. So yeah,
I want to add to a little bit of that founder interview profiling thing, because that's my profession, right? And most founders are horrible. So let's be very clear on this, because it's a little bit of a false dichotomy, right? Marketing the product or marketing the founder. Most founders are not marketable, at least at the stage of founding, right? And then they go through a few rounds, then they finally somehow they can piece together a story, right? So that takes time, right? And if you talk about objectively in the tech space where runway is everything, right? Like, I don't know if spending too much time with the founder thing matters. You probably just want to hit it hard in the launch, because that's a time when people are willing to give you a stage, right? Because which stage does matter, right? And you just do one or two so that people know, oh, who are you? So that when they search, oh, okay, that's it, right? Because honestly, you don't have a lot of stories to share, and, media will just look at you as like, okay, so spend more time on the product. That's my view.
I think as founders, like, we have pretty strong.
Just diss all the founders.
we have pretty strong origin stories to share, right? The reasons why we started a company, our value systems, right? What we put into our companies as well. Also, there's a lot of stories there. Can we use the Spider-Man analogy? There's also very different canon events that happens in your founding life, right? Those are stories. Those are stories that I think share. And I think, again, Trojan horse, try and relate that back to what you want to say. You don't want to share everything out, right? It doesn't make sense. So it's creating a bit of that coherent, consistent message that goes out. But there's actually a lot of stories from the founder. Why we start, how we're thinking, what we love to see, the vision that we see. Leveraging all of that actually sells the solution sells the technology.
Yeah. Nice. Good question. Anyone else? Question? Yes, question. Oh, I think Endawas does a pretty good job,
Yeah.
right? Endawas does a pretty... And if you look at the way they break down their marketing channels, it's very clear, right? They only do events for the high net worth because that's the high touch point, right? And when they profile that audience pool, then they even the place that they select for the event, like Fullerton Hotel, the people that they bring in to talk, it's all very selected, right? And they have quite a segregated marketing strategy for different target audience, right? So I think I would say I give them very high marks. Yeah, but they don't spend a lot. So they're very tactical. so from a media player, I hope they spend more on me lah. But objectively, when I look at all the fintech brands that did a big run over the past 5 years, I think they have built the highest brand value in terms of resonating with their audience and all that. And so far, when I talk to people, they all like us.
And do you think it's because they were very sharp in identifying kind of like that specific niche target audience that they want to go after?
Yeah.
And they just, devoted kind of like their resources into talking to this audience and not kind of like spreading it too thinly?
Yeah, so I think the beauty of what they did, they had a few phases in their brand development, and it always starts with one group, right? And they just focus on that one group, right? So your early adopters, right? Who will take you on? Working class millennial professionals that have some money sitting around, willing to invest, want to click it on their phone, right? So they started there, and you look at all the campaigns, it was just there. And then eventually you want to expand further, then they take on a different set. Like they ask the celebrity come in, CPF, right? So it's like a step by step, and I think it's quite interesting the way it's developed over time.
Yeah, and I think for smaller companies, I think that's super important. I think going back to Vidsi, like when we started as well, so just being very sharp and focused around who we know our audiences are and that market, like really designing, I think, certain plans to reach that, because we don't have the resources. So we can't go out and do like a nationwide kind of campaign. We can't buy media all around, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think being sharp in and then the sharp goes back to understanding the audience, because it's all about designing the audience inside, right? Part of designing the audience inside is to know who your audience are as well, so your customer base are, or at least who you want to target first. And I think from there, when it kind of snowballs up, then you can start opening up, because a lot of times, like clients come to us and say, hey, I want to hit everyone, right?
No.
But hitting everyone,
sure fail.
Yeah, means hitting no one.
Yeah.
We're really hitting no one, because the messaging just doesn't work already.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of real-time data being collected these days. Your strategy has run its course, right? When the growth is plateauing, then okay, maxed out already. This is as far as we go. Then we explore something else. Right? I think that's a better thought process. Nice. Good. Anyone else?
Again, I think we need to understand what the client wants to say, right? To move the end customer from current state to desired state. So that is an important question that I think we kind of need to understand first and foremost. Usually my process is talking to clients, understanding that, building some form of a creative brief for myself, so that I'm able to workshop that with my creatives. And my creatives have their own structures in place and the general one that I was talking about just now was, design characters, seeing that characters go through a journey from where they are to where they want to be, and it serves its purpose, if I do my job well, to understand where the marketer wants their customer to, is at, to be at. And the creative work is quite straightforward in that sense. But of course, the creative process is also about creating, tension and emotion. Because at the end of the day, emotion sells, right? And I think what we want to do is create a moment where start where we establish kind of like the character to the customer, like, hey, that's like me. And as the character kind of goes through that struggle, that journey, it creates the emotional kind of tension. And then it's up to us as creators, or the budgets that we have, to to pull as much or as little as possible, because then the payoff can come in quite powerful. And once that payoff is quite strong, that emotional attachment between the audience to the content and to the brand becomes more powerful. So yeah, it's just very basic way of, I think, how we try to craft it. But one thing I always like to say is, don't try to do the storyteller's job if you're not versed in that. And as a marketeer, while storytelling is a skill set we have, I always say that the marketeer's role of finding that insight is actually more important first and foremost, because all other things,
Yeah, outsource.
yeah, you can find someone else to tell the story, to buy media, right? That can be, it could be someone else in the team, or it could be outsourced to someone else. So don't try to do everything in that process. So what I kind of describe is what a storyteller does. Sometimes no budgets, right? So you design your own, right? Then you call a videographer to come in and you're like, hey, go and do this, point and shoot. But then the marketer plays the role of the storyteller. And if he or she is able to do that well, then yay. But if not, then the story might fall flat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the cheapest way is just to copy what's working, right? Because these days, everybody is A/B testing, right? There's just truckloads of content out there.
There's a lot.
Whatever that is working and trending, you just ask yourself, can my team create, right? If my team can recreate this, and then let's just go, right? And I think there's some copying element, and it works, right? So you must put down that, like, we want to be first, because every brand owner they may want to be first in the market does not exist, right? Unless you have big budgets, right? So copying is great.
Derek, I feel like we're walking away with lots of perspectives in terms of how to really build and get a brand out there, how to design in a very thoughtful way a content strategy, and really, tailor it to different markets. So really appreciate that, and thank you for joining us today.